Call the meeting to order. Call the roll.
Trustee Fenton.
Here.
Trustee Dodge.
Here.
Trustee Guerra.
Here.
Trustee Ruzick. Here. Trustee Condrello.
Here.
Trustee Carroll.
Here.
Mayor Peacock.
Here.
Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of December 17, 2018 regular meeting minutes.
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Fenton.
move to approve the minutes of the Board of Trustees meeting of December 17, 2018.
Second. Call the roll.
Trustee Fenton.
Aye.
Trustee Condrello.
Aye.
Trustee Dodge.
Aye.
Trustee Guerra.
Aye.
Trustee Ruzick.
Aye.
Trustee Carroll.
Aye.
Mayor Peacock.
Abstain.
Village of Orland Park honors its own Illinois Honor 200 recipients.
So this year, the state of Illinois, as part of its bicentennial, honored 200 veterans throughout the state of Illinois, and we were fortunate enough to have 3 that that were honored from the Village of Orland Park. So with that said, I would like to come down and make a presentation, and Jim, if you'd like to join me, to each of the 3.
Kevin Smith. So Kevin Smith served in the U.S. Coast Guard, and he is the co-chair of Illinois Joint Forces. He's also a member of the Veterans Higher Education Committee Group, which is a charitable organization dedicated to veterans. And he is being presented in recognition of being named an Illinois Honor 200 veteran for the state of Illinois bicentennial celebration. He's part of a big group of 200 veterans, and thank you very much for your service to our country and as well as the service to the community. I really appreciate it. Which military members will understand what those are. Tom made this particularly challenging to figure out. But it's actually in a case, and it's an Orland Park challenge point that has our Apache place the Peace Memorial on the front, and then has Orland Park on the back. Thank you very much. Tom is coming out. So, you're part of this. Thank you very much.
Yes. Jim?
I'm going home.
No. Don't you dare. Right here. One more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to honor Lieutenant Steve Glynn from the U.S. Navy. And Steve served in the Navy flying the EA-6B Prowler 10 years from 1985 to 1995. So him and I achieved some of the same airspace, probably at the same time at some point. He flew 25 combat missions in Operation Desert Storm over Iraq. He was awarded several air medals. He donates his personal time to Chicago Stand Downs, Brave Hearts, and the National Society for Children of the American Revolution. Thank you very much for your service.
Right here. One more. Get it?
Sorry. Thank you very much. And next, our very own Tom Dubleby, who was nominated, and actually, I had the honor of nominating him for the work makes my life much easier, it makes the board's life much easier, and for that, we really thank you, Tom, for all that you do.
Yeah.
Keith, over here. One more.
Want to clarify that?
Yeah.
There we go. Can I be right here? One more? We're good. Congratulations. Congratulations. Congratulations.
Consent agenda?
Is there anything to remove from the consent agenda? I would like to take items C and E off of the consent agenda. Trustee Ruzick.
I would move to approve items A through B, D, and F through L of the consent agenda.
Second.
Call the roll.
Trustee Ruzick?
Aye.
Trustee Carroll?
Aye.
Trustee Fenton?
Aye.
Trustee Dodge?
Aye.
Trustee Guerra?
Aye.
Trustee Calandrello? Aye. Mayor Peacock?
Aye. Item C.
Sportsplex Phase 1 HVAC Energy Savings Contract and Improvement.
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Fenton.
move to approve accepting the proposal for the Sportsplex Phase 1 HVAC Energy Savings Contract and Improvements from CTS Group of Chicago, Illinois, in an amount not to exceed $805,685.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from anyone else? So the reason I pulled this up the agenda is what I would like to know is, I understand they're our energy services contractor, but this is a pretty sizable amount to not bid out. And so I'd like to understand the $805,000.
The energy services contracts, or the point of the energy services contract, is to allow a contractor to come in and evaluate all of our facilities. CTS Group has done a very good job of evaluating all of our facilities and has helped us through a number of projects already. While we do not specifically bid out the actual work, we did go through a competitive process to select CTS Group as our preferred provider. Also, CTS Group, while they don't actually physically bid it, they do shop the project around and obtain quotes from a number of different vendors in order to obtain the best possible pricing. With this particular project, we've been working very closely with CTS Group to come up with a game plan that will meet the needs of the customers and the recreation staff at the Sportsplex. This particular project is extremely invasive, doing work on the entire second floor of the Sportsplex, and we feel like we've come up with a very good plan in order to facilitate that work.
I guess my concern is when CTS has been asked for information in the past, we really haven't gotten all the information the first time we asked for it regarding LED lighting, and as I recall, it was a $4 million approximation, and then we ended up going out for bid, and they ended up getting the contract, but it was bid at like 1.1 million or 1.2 million, as I recall. So I guess that's what gives me a little bit of concern, having a project of this size that we're not bidding out.
Well, I'll let Director Ingram address that, but the $4 million was when they were originally thinking every single light in the village, and that just simply was not the case. It was the village lights. That's why the discrepancy between the large number, and I'll let Director Ingram clarify that if it needs any other additional clarification. And they do go out, as Director Ingram stated, they do go out for competitive pricing for this. So they're not just going out and doing the work for that dollar amount. They are going out for the competitive pricing. However, for the lighting thing, and we did explain that to the board several times, that the difference between the 4 million versus a 1.2 million, whatever the final number was because of the number of lights. And we've had conversations about that on the board floor several times.
And Joe, we also had four times they were here and asked for information and was not given all the information that we needed. And I personally had to go through their spreadsheet to figure it out because they didn't pass us the information. So pardon me if I have a little bit of concern about an $805,000 contract that's not bid.
No one's questioning your questions. You have every right to. I'm just giving clarification between the 4 million and the $1 million gap.
So did we see the bid? Did we see the bids for these $805,000?
The different pricing that they got? No, I have not seen the actual.
And how
bid.
does this compare to the estimate that we had to do this work? That we, I mean, generally when you go out for contract, you have some idea what you think it's going to cost.
In all actuality, they were able to add some work that was anticipated to be budgeted in 2020. They were able to include that work this year. Specifically, there were fans that were anticipated to cost, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000. It was not a huge expense, but we had to cut that out of this year's plan because of our budget challenges. They knew that, and they were still able to get that work into this year's project.
So in your professional opinion, this bid came in under what you expected?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. Any other questions? Call the roll.
Trustee Fenton?
Aye.
Trustee Ruzick?
Aye.
Trustee Dodge?
Aye.
Trustee Guerra?
Aye.
Trustee Calandrello?
Aye.
Trustee Carroll?
Aye.
Mayor Pico?
Aye.
Main pump station motor control center replacement.
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Fenton.
move to approve accepting the proposal from Gibson Electric Company of Downers Grove, Illinois for the main pump station MCC replacement in an amount of $1,700,000, $1,620,200 plus $79,800 in contingency.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments on this? So my question is that it looks like there's only one bidder on this, and can we get a little bit of an explanation on that?
Yes, this one actually did not come in below the bid and came in higher than we anticipated. We were hoping to get more bidders. This was advertised through BidNet, and 386 different vendors were notified about this project. 21 different vendors downloaded the plans. We had 2 vendors that attended our mandatory pre-bid meeting. One of those vendors was unable to get all of their paperwork completed in a timely manner, so they were unable to bid. So we ended up with only one bid. The bid came in higher than anticipated. We evaluated what the rationale was, what the reason was for that, and we determined that there is so much work out there right now that contractors just aren't hungry. They don't need to price the work as competitively as we would have hoped in order to get the projects. We also determined that this was kind of a middle of the road project. While the cost is over $1 million, it is small compared to a lot of the large contractors, and it's larger than what some of the smaller contractors are able to do. Gibson Electric is highly qualified to do this type of work, and we feel that they'll be more than capable of handling it. The other challenge that we have is our motor control center is at the end of its life. There is an extraordinary lead time in order to procure the equipment. Delaying this project would delay it by 1 full year. We need to order the equipment right now, so it will be shipped, so we can do the installation next fall. We have to order it now for it to be available next fall. We can only do this work in the fall, so any delay would push it back until the fall of 2020. We looked at what some options were to potentially change some of the scope of work to see if we reduce some of the scope of work, and the work that we're proposing is what has to be done.
So I'm from the I guess the tone of the comments, I'm guessing you're as maybe disappointed or wish that there were more bidders as well, but you feel like we're in a position where we kind of have to do this, even though it came in a little bit over what we planned?
I would strongly encourage this to be passed.
So the question I would have going forward then is, if we know that there's more projects like this coming in the future, that we should start trying to identify some contractors that do this type of work and start developing relationships so that we get more than one bidder on these, so that it is competitive, because you know, in a situation like this where they know there's no one out there competing, we're going to pay a higher price.
I'm sorry, Director Ingram.
Between the village and the engineer, we personally reached out to at least 5 different contractors and asked them to bid on it. Contractors that we know, we're comfortable with, and while we might not have strong relationships with, we are aware of them and they're aware of us.
Okay.
Just to add to that, with all of our bids, if we know contractors that do this type of work, we do try and reach directly out to them and give them that information as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Ruzick?
So my question is, we started using BidNet approximately 2 years ago, would you say, to increase efficiencies? And are you finding that we're getting less bidders? Because that would be a bad result if that's the case. I understand it's more efficient for the village to do it this way, but if the end result is not what we want, we want to reconsider our process.
And I honestly don't think that it's necessarily BidNet. I think some of what John had just touched on with just the way the market is and the demand for those types of projects. We, on the professional services side, we went out for audit services, we went out for actuarial services, and we got a great response. I think we got 9 bidders on the audit, so I mean that's pretty good. We may not have gotten that.
Was it all through BidNet, or was it through your own?
No, it was all through BidNet. Yeah, and I think if we had done it the old way, where we published it in the newspaper and just put it on our website, I'm not sure that we would have gotten that response.
Well, I'm glad to see you're putting it out on social media now too. Yep. That's new, so that's good. Because I know with the real estate that was. Yeah. That did not work out using BidNet.
And with the real estate, we actually emailed it to a number of different realtors in the area.
But you had to still register through BidNet, which I think that additional layer of bureaucracy might be a turnoff to some local businesses.
But you'd be surprised too, because we go through it quite often. We kind of look through the vendors, see who's on there. If we have vendors that we have on our preferred list in-house that are not, we reach out to them and get them to register. There are a number of, I'd say probably more than half of the vendors that we use on a regular basis are on BidNet.
Well, I just wanted to comment. I'm glad to see you're putting it out on social media, and you're putting it out on our website too. And we're going to leave this up to you to make sure that this was the right way to go. Yep. Because
continue to explore ways to get more individuals to bid on our projects.
Trustee Carroll.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I just want to point out that with the exception of your question of Director Ingram as to where we should go forward or what we should do differently in the future, I just want to point out, in light of the recent comments about staff hiding things from the board, which I find to be patently false, that every one of the questions that you asked Director Ingram The answers to those questions were already contained in the packet that we've had in our hands since Friday. Every answer Mr. Director Ingram gave you was already in that bid packet that we have here, file number 2018-855, for the record.
Are there any other questions?
Mayor Pico.
Trustee Dodge.
Just John, we talked about this at committee. I'm pretty sure that this is essentially a very customized type of project, correct?
Correct. Every motor control center is made to order, which is why there's such a lengthy lead time on them.
Right. And, Greeley Hansen, they were involved in this from the word go.
Greeley and Hansen is they're the original designer of the main pump station.
And just, basically from a criticality, vulnerability perspective, if this thing went offline, what would happen?
We would be challenged in providing potable water to the village.
So we couldn't pump water?
Yeah.
That sounds like a bad outcome, John.
You are correct.
Thank you.
Couldn't wash your hair.
Smart ass.
Are there any other questions? Call the roll.
Trustee Fenton?
Aye.
Trustee Ruzick?
Aye.
Trustee Dodge?
Aye.
Trustee Guerra?
Aye.
Trustee Calandrella?
Aye.
Trustee Carroll?
Aye.
Mayor Pico?
Aye.
Procurement of village fleet?
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Fenton.
would it be possible for staff to give us a summary of this? Because as Chairman of Public Works, I would like to break this motion down and come up with a different scenario of what we could do for the 10 police interceptors versus the entire fleet that was budgeted for. I did meet with Enterprise, I met with staff, and we went through and came up with scenarios that are before us this evening, but since then I've talked to staff and come up with another option to do more or less an experiment with leasing versus purchasing. So I think if we could just discuss this through, let the board have any questions and staff explain it before I make any motion, because I've changed the motion that's in the packet.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll ask our village attorney, do we need to, since this has been put on the agenda, do we need to motion this and then amend it?
Yes.
Okay. So we need to make this motion first, then discuss it, and then amend the motion.
I move to approve entering into a 3-year agreement with Enterprise Fleet Management for the leasing of village fleet in an amount not to exceed the annual budget for the purchase and/or lease of vehicles. And I move to, that's it.
Second.
Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Carroll.
I think the reason Trustee Fenton's talking about an alternative motion, which we certainly could enter into an amendment, this is one of those unique circumstances where two committees kind of overlap. Historically, the purchasing of vehicles, since they're maintained by the Vehicle and Equipment Division of the Public Works Department, has been done under the Public Works Committee. And I say that as a past chair of the Public Works Committee. Decisions on whether to finance or lease or purchase vehicles typically is made through the Finance Committee, which would be my current committee. So Trustee Fenton and I spoke over the weekend, and since we don't sit on the same committees, to discuss possible options here. My understanding is we might have someone from Enterprise here tonight. Is that correct? The question is whether we want to enter into a leasing program, which is really a Finance Committee issue, which I plan on making a motion to send this back to committee. But there apparently is a time-sensitive issue on police interceptors, and Chief McCarthy's here as well, that we'd like to resolve one way or the other. So I guess my question as Finance Chair of Enterprise would be whether they would be okay with a trial period where we leased the police interceptors that we need to get right now while we further explore the possibilities of leasing the rest of the fleet at a future date. So I don't know if I could ask staff to inquire of Enterprise about that.
Yeah, Enterprise is, here, go ahead.
So Ben and Lou are here. I know you have a full name, but it's easier to say Lou, are here from Enterprise. Ben has been with us for a couple years, kind of just introducing this program to us, walking us through everything, and Lou has been helping us with the numbers and doing all the number crunching. So either one of them, I'm sure, can answer any questions that you have. I don't know if the board wants us to kind of walk through what we've gone through, or if you just want to jump into talking to enterprise. Either way is absolutely fine.
Mayor Pico, I have questions
Trustee
broadly
Dodge.
for staff. Is this a cash flow argument, or is this a total cost of ownership argument over the life of the vehicle?
So I think there's a couple different ways to look at it. And we have the pros and cons listed, and they're kind of lengthy and wordy. You know, we budget about $900,000 a year for vehicle replacements. We've been doing that. That's an average over the last 5 years. We've had those funds available. We have been able to budget it, and we have been able to buy the vehicles. Did it replace all of the vehicles that needed replacement in those 5 years? Probably not, because every year the Public Works Department comes forward with a much larger amount than that. So this would help us smooth out our cash flow. We could budget a lesser amount on an annual basis, use those funds for something else, and it would also allow us to have, I guess, what you would call a more efficient fleet, more up-to-date, more better equipment, more fuel-friendly, things like that. So it's a little bit of both.
So what's the number?
Well,
what's the total? You know, you guys, I've been saying this for decades, I think, literally.
So
my cost of capital has to be lower than theirs. So it's probably going to be really hard for you to make a mathematical case that this is a better deal from the village on a total cost of ownership.
So if
we don't have a cash flow crunch, and I don't think we really do, why are we doing this?
So
Before you
can you
answer,
jump to the spreadsheet on the agenda item just
Sure.
really quick, and
We'll
we'll
jump
walk
to
through
that,
high
but
level.
we can jump to the spreadsheet, but before you answer the question, because I think this is related, my question is related to this question, which is what I had asked for was a net present value of this, of leasing versus buy. And I've done a lot of buy versus lease net present values in my time, and when you do that, you always look at when you buy, you always look at what's going to be your cost to get rid of that vehicle, or what is you're going to get when you sell that vehicle, and that's going to be factored into your cost of ownership in the front. And I don't see that here. I understand from our discussion beforehand that the lease takes all of those residuals out, so the lease actually accounts for it, but the purchase doesn't. So those numbers are apples and oranges. To Trustee Dodge's point, we need to know what's the real number.
Yeah, so
on each of these.
Mayor Peacock, so the amount that you have on there is that purchase amount. That's what we budgeted for fiscal year 19. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to spend that full amount. The residual value that we'll get back, estimated out of that $1,190,000 that's listed there, is the vehicles that we'll sell at the beginning, because we're going to lease new vehicles, and that's about $90,000. And then in this analysis, which is just a snapshot of what the lease program would look like, it's just a 5-year snapshot. It doesn't mean the numbers are exactly what they're going to end up being. We would get about another $36,000 out of this program in residual value when we sell the police vehicles that roll off in 3 years. The net present value isn't much of the lease payments isn't much different than the current value, just because our discount rate is so low. We use the rate that we currently earn on our depository accounts, which is 1.25%. So the net present value is not that different. But if you take the residual out of the purchase price that's listed there, it is actually less to purchase them outright than it is to lease them. But then, and I'm not arguing either way, I'm just giving facts, but then I guess you don't have the most efficient fleet, you are still doing a lot of maintenance, you do have that cash outflow in year 1, so it's more cash going out the door up front as opposed to smoothing it out. Just
Chairman?
presenting the options.
Trustee Carroll.
There were a couple of facts I left out of my original comments, one of which was I did sit down with staff and with several vendors at one point talking about leasing. At that time, the decision was that if we were going to lease, we wouldn't lease the large trucks in Public Works. My understanding is that there's been some question as to whether that's still a position of staff and or the vendor. There was also discussion that if we were going to enter into a leasing agreement for our entire fleet, that we might, through attrition or otherwise, lose part or all of our vehicle and equipment maintenance staff, which my understanding is that is not the current position of staff. What I failed to also mention is that there is a third alternative motion contained in our packets, and that would be we do have the option, because there is a time sensitivity for Chief McCarthy's interceptors, but we do need those 9 soon because of the plant closing. There is the third option to do it per status quo for now, take those 9 and purchase them from the Suburban Purchasing Cooperative vendor, which we currently have through the state. So that's a third alternative motion as we further discuss this that we can consider tonight.
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Fenton?
It's actually 10 vehicles that if we choose to purchase and/or lease, the chief came up with another one. So where the motion does state 9, it is actually 10. It's up to the board what they want to do, if they want to purchase them through the co-op purchasing or to lease the 10. But, if you want to kick it back to finance for the rest of the vehicles and go over that.
Bless you.
But the reason, as you stated, it's the sensitivity of the police interceptors, and the chief can comment on this, is that the plant does close down. If we don't do it now, we're not going to get the vehicles.
So, having, considerable lease versus buy experience, not necessarily with vehicles or always trucks, but other capital equipment like airplanes and things like that. Some of the decision of a lease versus buy is, do you want to balance your fleet and not be all capital and not be all lease? Your alternative motion of just leasing the police cars might make sense if the numbers are close, because leasing tends to be a little bit better if it's a short term versus a long term. And our other vehicles, say an F-450, a 5-year lease, you might have an F-450 for, 15 years?
Well, we try and get as much life out of those vehicles as we can. So,
yeah, so
yes.
Am I guessing they're right there, about 15 years? Maybe 12? So well, so I have some experience with F-450s as well, and I can tell you I get more than 10 years out of them, and I think we do too. So that changes these numbers even more. So it seems to me that if you are going to experiment with leasing on a part of your fleet, it would make sense to do it on your short-term vehicles that you turn over in 3 years anyways. That's my perspective. I think, I don't know that we have all the numbers to make the entire decision here. At least I don't feel comfortable that we do.
Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Carroll.
I suppose, again, the motion to purchase always comes from Public Works, but from the Finance Committee perspective, I'm more comfortable buying the cars right now so that Chief McCarthy gets his fleet and having further discussion about this, because I know there were some different scenarios we were discussing in previous meetings that don't seem like they've been fully fleshed out. So that would be my preference as one member of the board and as the Finance Chair.
Mayor Pico.
Bad timing for that song.
No kidding.
Trustee Dodge.
I would be more than happy to see us buy the, is it 10, Trustee Fenton? 10 interceptors, and then send the item back to committee to kind of get into the nitty-gritty details of what's the optimal solve. So I don't know, who wants to make a motion? Do we need another motion, or how do you want to do this?
I can make another motion.
We can vote on, we can basically vote on this motion, and then we can make an alternative motion to purchase the vehicles. As for me, I think I look at the numbers here, and they're about the same, so I can go either way. As I think if we did the residual on it, they're probably almost exactly the same. So I can certainly stay purchasing, because I don't think we've done enough work on the leasing yet to fully understand it or understand the costs. And while smoothing out cash flow is nice, we still have a pretty low cost of capital, and we have the ability to purchase, and if that makes more sense, we should do that. So with that, we'll call the roll on the first
sorry,
motion.
Mayor Pico, what motion's on the floor?
So the motion that's on the floor is to lease all of these vehicles. I can read the motion exactly. So the motion that has been put is move to approve entering into a 3-year agreement with Enterprise Fleet Management for the leasing of the village's fleet in the amount not to exceed the annual budget for the purchase and/or lease of vehicles. It was motioned by Trustee Fenton and seconded by Trustee Ruzick. And call the roll.
Trustee Fenton?
No.
Trustee Ruzick?
No.
Trustee Dodge?
No.
Trustee Garrett?
No.
Trustee Calandrello?
Nope.
Trustee Carroll?
No.
Mayor Pico?
No. And I will now entertain a motion to approve the purchase of 9 Ford AWD police interceptors utilizing...
It should be 10.
Oh, 10. Sorry, 10 AWD police interceptors utilizing the Suburban Purchase Cooperative Vendor Curry Motors of Frankfort, Illinois, in an amount not to exceed
$329,760.
$329,760.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Call the roll.
Trustee Fenton?
Aye.
Trustee Ruzick?
Aye.
Trustee Dodge?
Aye.
Trustee Garrett?
Aye.
Trustee Calandrello?
Aye.
Trustee Carroll?
Aye.
Mayor Pico?
Aye.
Do we need a, I'm sorry, Mayor Pico, do we need a motion to send the rest of the question back to the committee?
No, we
Put it on a committee agenda for next.
we killed it, so they can put it on the agenda.
Yeah.
Village of Orland Park Ethical Standards of Conduct,
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Ruzick?
ordinance number, please.
5372.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make this motion just to open it up for discussion on the floor, and I think there's going to be some changes there.
I can barely hear her.
I move to pass ordinance number 5372 entitled, "An Ordinance Establishing a Code of Ethical Standards of Conduct for Officials and Employees of the Village of Orland Park that is applicable to persons in municipal service, whether compensated or not, and whether appointed or hired, and to prescribe discipline for violations thereof."
Second.
Before we move to the board for comments, there's a couple of people that want to speak, and then we also have a couple of people who wanted to share their comments for the record, but could not be here tonight. So I'll pass those out first, and then I'll call the other individuals up to speak. So there's this. I think there's three. Yeah. Pass that off. Three. Well, I believe.
Oh, okay.
1, 2, 3. So the first, and I'll just go ahead and read these for the record. The first one is from Chris Gary, who's on our Economic Development Advisory Board. He says, "Unfortunately, I have a board meeting for the Crisis Center at the same time on Monday, so I cannot attend. In general, I'm not fundamentally opposed to the ordinance. I think many of the things included are good ideas. My complaints are with the execution. I agree it's completely onerous to annually disclose with a notarized document, no less, all jobs held by immediate family. Also in Section 6, it says no accepted gratuities and gifts. In Section 7, there is an exemption for minor gifts. Section 12 references a state law relative to gift bans. Overall, there's a strong likelihood that there are redundancies with existing statutes. In my opinion, this is not ready for approval." So that's from Chris Gary. From Greg Lewis, he said, "Unfortunately, I will not be able to," and he's on the Technology Commission, by the way, "I will not be able to make the board meeting on the 9th because I will be out of town on business. Since I will not be at the meeting, I wanted to send you my thoughts and concerns regarding the ordinance. Please feel free to share my concerns and comments at the board meeting. I will always act ethically or honorably in my role on the commission. That being said, if this ordinance passes, I will probably resign from the commission. I agree with the intent to establish a written code of ethics and conduct. However, the provisions of the ordinance are onerous, specifically Section 6-3-C, which I think has been struck. Is that it says information of records. I am not sure specifically what constitutes information of records, but it would seem that under the normal course of business, employees and other village officials will have access to records. This provision puts those employees and officials at risk. Section 7, disclosure of real estate assets. I do not want to disclose my real estate holdings where it can become public record. I have nothing to hide, but in a volunteer position, I feel this disclosure is unnecessary and a notarized annual filing is burdensome. Section 8, disclosure of economic interests, and Section 9, disclosure of business interests. I will not disclose information relating to my consulting business to the village. This is a deal breaker for me. There is no conflict of interest with the village, but I don't want the information to be part of the public record. Section 10, disclosure of other employment. Same thoughts as Section 8 and 9 above. By the way, my daughter teaches dance at the Orland Park Recreation Department. Section 14, other prohibited conduct. Some of the items listed are broadly defined. Seems to me that opens up many opportunities to use this list against an employee or village official. Section 10, since anyone that lives, discipline of officials. Since anyone that lives or has a business interest in the village can sign a formal complaint, this ordinance opens up opportunities for abuse. If a citizen doesn't like trustee, they can easily file a complaint. There is no repercussion or consequence to anyone that files a frivolous complaint. Section 13, penalty. Given the probability of frivolous complaints, a cap of $1,500 cap on reimbursed attorney's expenses will discourage people to serve as village trustee or official. So those were the two things entered into the record that you have. And now, John McCannon. And a reminder, 3 minutes.
Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to make a few comments on the ethics ordinance, and I think I'm going to echo the comments that you already had in writing. I was not aware of that, but one of the, I think, adjectives that was used several times is onerous. I think this ordinance is blatant big government overreach. I think these provisions many of these provisions are onerous, And the ones that stood out to me were number 7, Article 7, disclosure of real estate interests, Article 8, disclosure of economic interest, 9, and the other ones that have already been cited. I think I'm just being redundant by echoing those statements. As a volunteer, as a member of the Technology Commission, I would have to say that I would not want to provide this information to the village. I wouldn't want to disclose my personal financial, real estate interest, business interest, and have that as public information regardless of what this says. I think we elect officials and we appoint volunteers to commissions that should be of good moral and ethical standing, and if not, then they have no business serving the Village of Orland Park, and we either disqualify them or vote them out at the next election. I think it's interesting right now, concurrently, serendipitously, what we see going on in the city of Chicago. I think the city of Chicago has a pretty extensive board of ethics. They have 7 members, a big staff, they have a big budget. Let's look at what's happening with the city of Chicago. Perhaps that's not a good parallel. However, over the last couple of decades, 30 aldermen are convicted of various moral, crimes, let's say. Ed Burke, Tony Preckwinkle, Gary Chico, certainly prominent names. Look at what's happening with them. They have ethical standards for the city of Chicago. So does Cook County, so does the state. We've had governors convicted, go to prison. I don't see the point. I really don't see the point of what an ordinance is going to do to keep people from behaving in an unethical manner. So I'm certainly against this kind of an ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Jack Craven.
Thank you for the opportunity to be able to address this particular item. I received this copy last week and read it, and then I read it again today. I'm also on the Economic Development Advisory Board, and in that particular official commission, it's something that if this is enacted, I'm going to have to resign from that particular group as well. I echo a lot of the thoughts that were previously done, but I've got some additional things to sort of share. I don't know who wrote this, but it was poorly written. I mean, there's a lot of areas that need clarification in here. There's a lot of areas here that basically don't even apply and are out of date. I work for a Fortune 500 company. I go through ethics training every year where I take this particular course for 90 minutes, answer 100 questions. If I don't pass, I can't work there. If you put a document like this in front of all your employees, they're going to have to hire an attorney. And again, this is something that is not necessary. And again, I look at the overreach on here. Just reading it for myself, we have a different form of government here. But it seems like all the power rests between the manager, village manager, and the attorney. I don't understand why you could support this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Carroll.
I came into receipt of an email sent from a former statewide elected candidate that had said that you, Mr. Mayor, sent out an email to her requesting her to forward this to all of her email recipients from Orland Park, and said that she was reaching out with this email to subscribers on her email list that are from Orland Park with a message from your current mayor, Keith Pico. Here are his immediate requests for help. Number 1, sign up for my email list. Number 2, attend the village board meeting on January 7th. There is important legislation being discussed that will limit free speech under the guise of an ethics ordinance. Number 3, attend the fundraiser for the slate of candidates that I support. When you look at this ethics ordinance, it says that the public policy declaration is to be the standard of ethical service to the Village of Orland Park, that all employees and public officials avoid conflicts between their private interests and those of the general public whom they serve. Specifically, they all kind of mirror the same general prohibited acts, which is taking gifts, which is trying to use your position with the village to gain preferential treatment for yourself or others, to gain contracts, to have financial benefit to your position. And there's a reason for that. And I agree with the last gentleman that spoke, which is the private sector is entirely different than government. We all have to fill out by state law ethics statements, completely disclosing our financial interests, our real estate interests, so that you, the voters, when you are deciding for whom to vote, know that we don't have conflicts of interest that we're trying to serve with our elected position. And this ordinance is trying to address that. But we have seen in the last year and a half behavior that has transcended all norms of ethical behavior in the past. And that's why the trustee that kind of spearheaded this ordinance being drafted looked at our old ethics ordinance, and it clearly was out of date, and it clearly didn't address the behavior we're seeing. First and foremost, Mr. Mayor, when you were elected, before you were even sworn in, you requested from staff our vendor list. We all thought it was so you could look at it and make sure that there weren't people that were on our vendor list that were receiving business that were somehow connected to one of us, and we applauded that. We thought that's what it was for. But no, we found out you used that vendor list to send a request for donations to all of our vendors, one of whom was Comcast. What do you do after you get a donation from Comcast? You try to convince the board to take action that would have cost this village hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, in covering Comcast's expenses in burying their cables. Another donation you received was from Horton Insurance. We've got emails from one of the proprietors of Horton Insurance offering you his condo in Florida, offering to take you fishing. You tried to spearhead us not going to bid to renew Horton as our vendor for insurance during that process, which even though the previous finance chair had promised the public we were going to go to bid, and I made sure that we did go to bid. Now, ultimately, they were chosen as the vendor, but you were trying to push them to get renewed without going to bid. Secondly, you got a consulting contract with Horton since you received that donation from them. And then finally, ethical conduct like engaging in political activities under the color of your office. I've spoken with members of the Chamber of Commerce that said you were circulating petitions for your slate of candidates while attending a ribbon cutting as the mayor of Orland Park. This is the kind of behavior this ordinance is hoping to address. It's far time that we update our ordinance because we have been seeing ethical behavior that has skirted any norm that's previously existed in this village.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Ruzick.
So this came up when we were having the hearings on video gaming, and I think it was a member of the public who pointed out that our ethics ordinance had some gaps in it, which, again, that was probably 5 months ago, 6 months ago, and I decided at that time to ask staff to look at it. And I did see that it was pretty weak. Now, since I had the attorney work on an ordinance, which was he drafted, and you know, it's not a perfect ordinance. I'm not proclaiming it to be a perfect ordinance. We put it out there about a month ago, I'd say, for comment. I have received some comments from some of the trustees. The attorney has. Some of them are good comments. I mean, one is, you know, do we want to make it onerous to have the documents notarized? I don't think that's important. I mean, all of us and you individuals who serve have to fill out a statement of economic interest with the Cook County. For those of you who have done it, you know it's nonsense. And it is the most difficult to understand. As an attorney, I have a very hard time understanding what they're asking for. I felt that this was clearer and that it would be at the local level so that it would be available to our residents. But I did, Chief McCarthy's gone. He called me about an hour ago and expressed some concerns that he had about some of the provisions that I've shared with the attorney. So it's still a work in progress. It doesn't have to be passed tonight, and I'd propose that it not be passed tonight. I would propose that we take some of these suggestions that some of our commissioners have brought forward and look at it again. There's nothing magical that it has to be passed tonight. So I would just encourage anybody else who has. I know I spoke with Trustee Dodge. I think he has shared some of his concerns with the attorney, and we'll continue to share some of those concerns.
Mayor Pico, just a couple, and I've got a marked up version which I can give to the attorney. At a minimum, I wouldn't mind if we split the ordinance. I'd like to have a crisp ordinance specifically related to officials and appointed members, and then a separate ordinance specific to employees. Right, so I just think it might be easier to read, easier to track. Let's just kind of cleave those into, and there's a number of things in here where, you know, I get the intent, and I certainly support the intent, and I couldn't agree more with Trustee Ruzic that, you know, for fun, I went and I pulled down my statement of economic interest from the county's website, And, you know, I'm not an attorney, but I think I can master the English language mostly. This one is it's a tough form, and it doesn't really get anything. So, you know, operationally, another suggestion I wouldn't mind, another change is I think some of the specific technical requirements in here are good. We should keep them. There's a few things in here that are pretty vague that we got to walk back and tighten up a little bit so they're specific. Because if I have it, fear is in a fairly charged and animated political climate. Anything from anybody could be perceived as a violation of an ethics ordinance, and the next thing you know is we've got a whole bunch of mini Robert Muellers running around, which isn't going to do anything good for the very stated purpose of defending our reputation. So they go, oh, okay, we got to work through this. So I'll get those forms to the, the idea to the attorney so we can work them through. And the other thing is I wouldn't mind if we had our own form. Mm-hmm. Right, so we call for a number of disclosures, which I think we can work through and get some clarification of definitions and make them very specific. We should probably think about a form so that anybody running for office or anybody who's in office would be able to get through it a little bit easier than what's both on the state disclosure forms and the county. So work in progress. I mean, system's working, put an idea out there, and we evolve it. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Ruzick.
To Mr. Craven's point, the first time I served on a commission years ago and found out that the county required me to report the sale of a public stock that was sold for in excess of, how does that ever apply to me serving on the police commission? I thought it was absolutely nonsensical. I called the attorneys and I said, tell me this is not true. I don't have to disclose this. That sort of disclosure we're not asking for at the local level. I think that has no bearing on, you know, your stock on a publicly traded company. How does that relate to you serving on a commission in town? So those are the sort of things that we're not asking for at this level, and I think this is much easier to read and understand than what the county is asking for.
Any other questions or comments? Trustee Guerra.
I would only add, and I support Trustee Ruzick's idea here to get an ethics statement that has some teeth in it that we can live with. To Trustee Dodge's comments, yes, we don't want to see, you know, city wars going on like they in Chicago years ago, where everybody was just hiring lawyers left and right. But I think it's important that we do something like this because there's some questions from time to time about things, and if people own, you know, interest in a business in town, and you're going to vote on something that would impact that business, the general public has the right to know, and this board has the right to know, and it's important that we do. So I think we need to have something, and this isn't exactly it. I agree, Carol, or Trustee Ruzick, but I think we can work on it, and we can get it exactly where it needs to be without being too burdensome to anybody, but still giving a clear picture of who everyone is.
Mr. Mayor. Trustee Fenton.
Go ahead. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to, I concur with what everybody has said. I think it's way too wordy there. Again, I'm not an attorney. I was a special ed teacher, so we always did things short and to the point. And 15 pages of legalisms may suit all the legal beagles up here, but I think for anybody out in the, you know, the average person isn't going to understand half of this and not know if you were out and about and somebody said, can I offer you a piece of bread or something? I know that sounds ridiculous, but is somebody standing behind me going to come in and say that, you know, Trustee Fenton accepted a piece of bread and now she's going to that establishment? So I think that's where, like they said, we don't want 50 million claims because $1,500 is nothing for an attorney's fee. So I think it's a good idea. What we had wasn't that worthy. So I think what we need to do is to continue working on this. And so I will get my additional comments to Trustee Ruzick and to the attorneys.
Any other comments? Mr. Mayor. Trustee Calandrello.
I'll just be very brief. I think I agree with everyone where I'm glad that we're just talking about this. The intent is this disclosure. My big thing is if you have a business or you have any interest, just disclose it and let the voters, let the citizens figure out if there's a conflict, and just knowledge is power. So I agree with almost everything everyone said, and I thank us again is up there, and I think it's just all about disclosure and making sure that we're serving the people. More information the better, but I do know that some of our commissioners maybe that would take them out because they're volunteer positions, and at the end of the day, most times it's going to be the vote of us 7 anyway. So maybe that's something we take out for the commissioner side, because they're not, at the end of the day, the voting or approving it at the end. So, and I wouldn't want to waste good talent because they don't want to disclose about a house they have 2 doors down or anything like that. Thank you.
Any other comments? So now that everyone's finished their comments, I'll make mine. First, let me be perfectly clear. I'm all for holding elected officials that serve our town to a high ethical standards. It's why I wholeheartedly support, if signed and disclosed everything articulated in the various ethics guidelines and statutes already on the books. We already do have an ethics ordinance, so if it needs to be modified some because we have a gap, that's fine. I do have some concerns about the process. I was made aware of this ordinance on the evening of Friday, December 15th for a board meeting, or I guess 14th, for a board meeting on the 17th. Did anyone know about this before it went on the agenda item? Any trustee?
I did.
So it's my understanding that we've been working on this since September with Kleinthorpe and Jenkins, the village manager's office, according to Kleinthorpe and Jenkins. And I have the email here that I asked them when they started working on it, and they said September.
Not with the village manager's office.
Huh?
Not with the village manager's office.
Yeah. I'm just out, I'll pull it out and read it here. I said, did you draft this? Because I didn't, when I saw it, I sent it on Saturday. If so, for who? Mayor, it was drafted by Dennis Walsh at the request of the village manager's office. Please tell me the date of this request. Recalls for this request were made in September with revisions made last week. So that's what I have. If that information is inaccurate, that's what I received from the attorneys. In any case, the point is that none of us were aware of this. This is a pretty big deal. And for us not to be made aware of it until just before a Monday vote, fortunately, there was a delay in the vote, and I appreciate everyone for delaying it because this is an important issue. And so we had some additional time to look at it. But it was on the agenda for the 17th with essentially 2 days to look at it. That for something of this magnitude, it should be brought forth a little bit sooner. Second, Joe, could you tell me how much this cost to draft?
I can't. All I was asked to do was provide the ordinance. So,
Okay.
no, I don't. I don't have that information.
All right.
Mr. Walsh is right here. Maybe he can answer the question for you.
Okay. All right. So you're right. So let's talk about the ordinance itself. So there's a lot of sentences in here that are typical of an ethics ordinance. However, the Village of Orland Park has already adopted the prohibited political activities and gift ban sections of the Illinois State Employee and Ethics Act, as well as some other things and associated penalties. Additionally, our employees are subject to employee policies and/or the union contracts. Elected officials, as we've discussed, are subject to campaign disclosure laws, election codes, and campaign finance laws. Elected officials and certain appointed commissioners must file statements of economic interest, which many of us file. We have to file every year. So I guess one of the questions I have for you, Joe, are there any serious ethical issues with our employees that we don't know about?
I don't believe at this point in time, our employees are acting unethical, not to my knowledge.
Okay, I wasn't aware of any problems, so, okay. So I guess the question I have to ask is, before drafting this, is what problem are we trying to solve here? And I think that's what we have to know first. This ordinance, as written, is a solution that creates a problem. Despite its name, it's not about ethical standards of conduct, but it gives a lot of power to village employees. It gives the ability for political majorities to bully those who disagree with them. I think Kathy Fenton brought up a good point about what people could bring up to the board floor if they chose to. So let's start with the standards of conduct. It uses 4 headings: principles, honesty, fairness, and perception. Perception is the intuitive understanding and insight. So we're going to judge people on intuitive understanding and insight when something hurts the perception of the village. Several other undefined terms: benefit, fairness, justice, honest. Who's the arbiter of this? Next to disclosure requirements, somebody listed all of those, a bunch of those disclosure requirements. The documentation is not defined, to Trustee Dodge's point. We'd need to make sure that was very simple. It's certainly not laid out here. But who would have to disclose these items? Self-employed contractors, self-employed CPAs, real estate agents, consultants, any business owners would probably need to disclose their Orland Park customers, plus any potentially any customer who works for a business that works for the village. An example, again, you have to disclose business interests or anyone who works for a business that does business with Orland Park. Okay, where does it end? Where does this stop? Okay, if you own a business on the I-80 corridor and you're helping develop the I-80 corridor, by definition, you're probably helping yourself because you're developing the I-80 corridor. Is that a conflict of interest? So I don't think it's very clearly defined. Who will want to serve, as you just heard, as a trustee or on an advisory board with these disclosure requirements? We've just heard that many of them won't. Who would be given a pass on these types of disclosures? Anyone that has attorney-client privilege would not have to, attorney-client privilege, medical professionals, they wouldn't have to disclose anything. So I don't know what the goal is here, but it really hinders our citizens from serving in any capacity. This also expands the village manager's powers. So it says here that if an improper order was given by the village manager, they should discuss the matter with the village attorney. I would think that they should be reporting that to the board, since the village manager reports to the board. The attorney is hired by the village manager, so there's a conflict of interest right there. The language requiring competing points of view to be discussed with the village manager prior to take action or making a decision is really a dangerous affront to the democratic process. Elected officials and boards, by their very nature, are faced with competing and legitimate points of view. We've had plenty in the last 18 months. Rules that restrict free speech protections of elected officials potentially restrict open discourse with the public in favor of the view of unelected staff. It is not the place of the attorney or the manager to direct elected officials on what action to take. You can't deny an official the right to share their views and attempt to sway their policy, public policy. The village manager's powers to discipline employees has been broadened significantly, and the village manager already has a significant power to discipline, but now he has an arsenal of vague and undefinable actions to justify any positions he takes. So we certainly have to clean that up significantly before you can put this on our employees. I'm glad to see that someone had the sense to point out that requiring a village official to obtain records via the Freedom of Information Act should be stricken. Obviously, the corporate authorities should have access to information and records without having to go through FOIA, because it unnecessarily restricts the flow of information to those who need it most to make decisions. Then there's the catch-all, which is other prohibited conduct. And no village official or employee shall knowingly furnish false or misleading information on any public matter when giving requested information to members of the public. So I'm going to give you an example. We took a buyout deal for $97.50. One way to say we lost $7 million on this deal, which from a real estate perspective we did. Someone says we made $7 million on this deal if you factor in the future tax incentive or future property taxes that are paid. So one person saying we lost 7, one person saying we made 7. Who's misleading? They're both actually saying something that's accurate and true. So it just depends on how you look at it and how it's positioned. So who's going to be the arbiter of this? Something else that's prohibited, impeding government efficiency or operation. I've seen this language in other documents, but it always includes the word intentionally. So intentionally impedes. So if I stood in front of a snowplow, that'd be intentionally impeding. Otherwise, who's to judge whether it was intentional or not? For example, are we to believe that the missing word was an oversight, or was it intentional? Affecting adversely the confidence of the public in the integrity of the village. Who judges this? In other words, should anyone criticize anything about the village, they can be tried? Engaging in an act, actions, or other conduct contrary to honesty, justice, or actions of moral turpitude. Again, who is the judge of this? Another good one, participating in decision-making affecting the interests of one's business or immediate family. The decision-making may include monetary decision, labor agreements, or other family. So does this mean if we're working for the village, we can't participate in any decisions that affect our business or immediate family? I mean, we're all local officials. That's kind of what we do. So only single people with no family, no job need apply? I don't think that's the intent here. I suppose you meant to say participating in village decisions, and maybe that's a small oversight, but I live here, I have many business clients here. Doesn't every decision I make affect my business and my immediate family? So where do we draw the line? These items are simply a catch-all to stop speech and expression of opinion. The most protected speech of all is political speech. That is why elected officials have broad protections related to their speech. The best answer to speech you don't like, I don't like what Trustee Carroll says, is more speech. It's not independent investigations. The penalties and complaints. According to this document, any person who is a citizen can file a complaint against any village official alleging a violation of any section of this ordinance. Think about this for a minute. Anyone who disagrees politically can make any of these allegations against elected or appointed officials. When this happens, it is turned over to an independent counsel, chosen from a rotating list of attorneys to investigate. Back to Trustee Dodge's point, how is the Robert Mueller and Ken Starr thing working out at the federal level? That's what we'll have running around here. Attorneys making a bunch of money at taxpayer expense and elected and appointed officials being personally and financially destroyed. That's the potential for this as it's written. There's no carve-out in the Open Meetings Act to protect officials, so these hearings would be in public, and every one of them would need to be responded to. So a couple of individuals who disagree with any single person on this board could tie this board up in knots with public hearings and spend their time destroying the reputation of anyone they don't like. A violation of this act can be fined an amount not to exceed $1,000. The fine must be fought in a circuit court. If the accused is found to be not guilty, then the accused can receive $1,500 towards attorney's fees. That's about, depending on the attorney, 4 to 6 hours maybe of attorney fees. So who benefits from this ordinance? From what I see here, attorneys benefit from this ordinance because there's going to be a lot of them hired. The village manager benefits because his powers have been expanded. Anyone who doesn't have to disclose information is also benefits from this. But the process by which this ended up here is also appalling, that when this came up on a Friday and on Monday, we're planning on voting on this. Fortunately, again, we had 3 weeks. This is really, as written, this is a bad piece of legislation. It silences political speech and political opponents. It requires disclosures that will discourage anyone except someone protected by privilege from running or serving. It expands the power of the village manager away from this board, and therefore it reduces the power of the citizens of Orland Park because they elect us. And it can be used to punish political opponents and tie us up in litigation. The answer to free speech is not this. The answer is more speech. I'm happy to have a discussion on ethics and filling any gaps that we have in current laws and our current ethics ordinance. But this discussion should start from scratch, and it should start with a couple of questions. 1, is there a demonstrated ethics problem that we're trying to solve? 2, what is that problem? Then it should also be governed by a couple of overarching concepts. 1, the changes should be constitutional. 2, the changes should be at a minimum needed to solve the problem so that we don't overreach. Additionally, these discussions should be held in open public meetings where the public gets input. I would suggest that we vote on this, we vote it down, and then we start this process from scratch and have open hearings about the ethics issues that we may or may not have.
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Ruzick.
Just a comment in response. As I said, I did ask staff to look at this a couple of months ago and then did nothing further with it. That was just because I just didn't have the time to look at it. So I wasn't secretly hiding this from anyone on the board. It really wasn't ready for review till shortly before then. And I didn't anticipate that this was going to be enacted in one fell swoop. Much like we talked about our video gaming ordinance and it looked nothing like what it ended up looking with, I thought it was a starting point. So this was not an effort to try and push anything through. Mr. Mayor, you contacted me directly and asked me to not even discuss it at the last meeting, and I said, absolutely, we're going to postpone this. So, I really do take offense to your characterization of, and certainly you know, you're mentioning that an attorney such as myself would not have to make disclosures. I would encourage you to talk to our attorney about what this means. Some of these things you've mentioned, it's just not the case. I mean, I think this is a disclosure ordinance. It's not about having to disclose who your clients are. If you have a consulting business in town, nobody is making you disclose that you have clients such as those. So I think you've misconstrued some of it. And again, we asked for comments and we didn't receive any of these comments until today. So again, I would propose that we continue this till the next meeting, entertain some of these changes, but to start from scratch, I don't think we did that with our video gaming ordinance. I think we continued to tweak it, and we can continue to tweak this as it goes along.
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Carroll.
In light of Trustee Ruzic's comments, I have a motion to table this.
Second.
The motion has been moved to table and has been seconded. Call the roll. Unless someone has a discussion about the tabling. Anybody have any comments about tabling it? Call the roll.
Trustee Carroll.
Aye.
Trustee Guerra.
Aye.
Trustee Fenton.
Aye.
Trustee Dodge.
Aye.
Trustee Ruzick.
Aye.
Trustee Calandrello.
Aye.
Mayor Pico.
Aye.
Congressman Daniel Lipinski, lease agreement extension.
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Fenton.
move to approve a 2-year lease agreement with Congressman Daniel Lipinski, 116th Congressional District Office.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Snide comment, Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Dodge.
Could one of the attorneys explain counterparty risk? Are we going to get paid on this, given what's going on with the federal government?
I'm assuming it's the same rate as what we've done in the past?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Call the roll.
Trustee Fenton.
Aye.
Trustee Dodge.
Aye.
Trustee Guerra.
Aye.
Trustee Ruzick.
Aye.
Trustee Calandrello.
Aye.
Trustee Carroll.
Aye.
Mayor Pico.
Aye.
Establishing an administrative procedure of assessing and determining claims under Public Safety Employment Benefits Act.
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Carroll.
Ordinance number, please.
5373.
I move to pass ordinance number 5373 entitled an ordinance establishing an administrative procedure of assessing and determining claims under PSEBA, P-S-E-B-A.
Second.
Any questions or comments? I'd like to give a quick explanation for the audience. Joe?
Yeah, this is, again, up, we had a couple of changes. This is basically requires that employer who employs a full-time law enforcement officer, correctional probation officer, or firefighter who on or after the effective date of the act suffers a catastrophic injury or is killed in the line of duty shall pay the entire premium on the employee's health insurance plan for the injured employee, their spouse, and other dependent children. So it's basically just an ordinance that we need to gain. Attorney Walsh, I know, worked on this, and I don't know, Attorney Walsh, if you have any further comments on.
Yeah, it was before the board, and Trustee Carroll asked that excuse me, additional time be given to the applicants and their families who are going to qualify for this benefit. It also defines a catastrophic injury, which is not defined under the Act. So it's really a cleanup of the comments that Trustee Carroll had last time in terms of the procedure to be able to make a claim and the notification that families will get as a result of that.
Any other? Trustee Carroll?
I want to thank staff and council for cleaning this up. They were using a boilerplate draft ordinance from the Illinois Municipal League. My concern was, especially in the event of one of our officers being killed in the line of duty, that the surviving spouse might be dealing with not just grief issues, but potentially, underage children that they're dealing with, and I didn't want to have them missing a 5-day deadline, which was one of the deadlines in the original ordinance, prohibit them from receiving any benefits. So we did extend that, and we also, in the ordinance, for due cause shown, allowing the village manager to extend that timetable in the event of a spouse dealing with the minor children and everything else after the loss of their loved one. So it just kind of cleans up some of those terms.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll.
Trustee Carroll.
Aye.
Trustee Dodge.
Aye.
Trustee Fenton.
Aye.
Trustee Guerra.
Aye.
Trustee Ruzick.
Aye.
Trustee Calandrello.
Aye.
Mayor Pico.
Aye.
That's it. Nobody else signed it.
Are there any other citizens to speak? Board comments? Trustee Fenton?
I just wanted to take the opportunity to wish everyone a happy and healthy 2019, and just remember always to continue to shop local.
Trustee Calandrello?
Just want to wish everyone a happy new year. Thank you.
Trustee Ruzick?
No comments, Mr. Mayor.
Trustee Guerra?
I would, first of all, like to make one correction. The total property taxes from the triangle right now, from 9750, exceed the amount we received from the entire strip mall when it was in place. So it is a gain. Yes, we had an outside consultant review all the paperwork. No one had any conversations with them, and their analysis is that when the TIF is complete, the village will be profit $6.8 million. That's not made up by anybody on this board. That is from our outside consultants that we reviewed, so that's clear. As far as an ethics ordinance is made here tonight, it was never intended to be voted on tonight. We were all aware that it was going to be a discussion item. Trustee Ruzick removed it from the agenda at our last meeting because the mayor was not able to attend. That was a very reasonable thing to do. Do we need an ethics statement? Absolutely. If you have a business in town, you're a consultant, and you're consulting with a company that does business with the village, be serious. Of course we need to have that disclosed. And as far as who gets to judge, the public gets to judge. That's simple. I think in this climate, when we look around and see all this political shenanigans going on at the federal and the state in our neighboring communities, what better thing to do than just put some sunshine on it, let people see and judge for themselves. That's all. Happy New Year.
Sorry, Mayor.
Up to you, Trustee Carroll.
Given his hairstyle.
Go ahead, come on up.
Yeah, given your hairstyle, Mike and I are okay with this.
We absolutely love to hear from him.
I'd first like to compliment the water department on a fix to a water main that's broken several times in Crystal Tree. But as of early December, there was a break and they came at night, fixed it. But the patch and repair is a safety issue. And I reached out to the village manager, and the patch is stone. It's not a cold patch, it's not smooth, it can't be shoveled or walked on safely. And I have gotten no response to fixing it safely. It hasn't been cleaned up. The streets are full of debris from this fix. And then the patch, the driveway is only 2 years old. I was told it will only be a patch, and I feel that's not fair.
Thank you for your comments. Joe, are you familiar with this?
I am, and we went out there and we checked, and I was assured by our Public Works Department that we have done this type of patch in the past, and that it is safe. I did ask our Public Works Department to monitor it to see that if it starts to crumble or becomes unsafe, to try and fix it again. My understanding from Director Ingram that they can't do a patch until the weather gets a little better. So I'm working on the expert of the Public Works Department, but we've exchanged several emails together with one another, and there's only so much we can do at this point in time. I believe the request was to replace the whole driveway, but we we don't do that. We just replace the area that's been impacted.
Sir, could you
so we'll
state your
continue
name
to
for the
monitor
record?
it, and it is on our priority list that as soon as the weather does break, that we would get out there to finish the patching. It's really just a timing thing, and unfortunately that's just the case because of the weather.
Been in construction 30 years. I'm sorry. It hasn't been addressed on the cleanup.
Can we get your name and address for the record, and then I'll be happy to follow up?
Thank you. Patrick Moriarty. 14425 Lake Ridge Road, Bristol Tree.
Okay, thank you for making us aware, and we'll follow up with you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Trustee Carroll?
Thank you. To kind of follow up with what Trustee Gear was saying, respond to a couple of your comments, Mr. Mayor, about the ethics ordinance. Several of your questions were who's to judge, and right in there it says independent legal counsels to judge. It talks about what's going to be investigated, and it also talks about what's exempted. It doesn't get into political speech, contrary to your comments. It specifically excludes expression of views and opinions in political speech. That's not in the ordinance as it's currently drafted. I have no problem because it seems like the majority of the board wants to tweak it, and it should be tweaked. But a lot of what you said, as Trustee Ruzick pointed out, just simply is not what's in the ordinance, as a licensed attorney reviewing it myself. It also does not expand the village manager's powers because the board, right in the ordinance, the board investigates allegations against the village manager. It's just that since we are the council manager form of government, we have no direct authority over our employees. The village manager does. So if they have a complaint about their boss, it says to go to the village attorney. The village attorney would then make the determination whether we need to be aware of it in our oversight of the village manager or not. But I suppose the question you asked is the key one. Is there a demonstrated ethics problem we're trying to solve? In my estimation, the answer to that question is yes. I will also harp on the fact that we had another illegal series of robocalls over the weekend, Friday, Saturday, and today. And this has been going on for a year and a half now with these illegal robocalls that violate federal law. And again, this is one that completely misstates facts, completely 100% false. I'm sure a lot of you got it. So I got a lot of complaint calls Saturday and today from residents. The good news is almost all of them said, well, whoever's behind these robocalls is someone that we definitely would not support, we will not vote for. But the one consistent truth we've seen through all of these 8, 10, or 12 robocalls has been that these calls attack staff, which I don't know what political neophyte would attack staff, because we are the ones that are to be held accountable if there's something going wrong. So why a politician or a political candidate would attack our staff who is carrying out the policies that we as the board implement or put forth is beyond me. But they attack staff or they attack 6 people on this dais, the 6 trustees. The one consistent truth has been that not one of these robocalls has attacked the mayor. Well, it doesn't take too many brain cells to rub together to figure out who directly or indirectly is behind these robocalls. And Mr. Mayor, you told all of us you have a pretty good idea who's doing them. It's clearly time. These are a violation of federal law. They're going to cell phones. They don't state who's placing them, and they violate multiple federal laws. Anyone that's gotten one that has a problem with them, go to the FCC website and fill out a complaint form. Put down the date and time you received the call, the number from which you received it, and they'll investigate. But they're hard to track down without spending a lot of money. My understanding is there are ways to do that, and we're exploring those now. But Mr. Mayor, it's clearly time if you have an idea who's doing this. And in fact, one of the statements made in this weekend's robocall was completely parroting a comment you had made in a budget meeting where no member of the public attended it. So it's someone that's close to you. I'm not saying it's you, but it's high time that you renounce these calls. You tell the people that you think are making them that they need to stop, because the voters I've spoken with are not going to support anyone that's behind these calls. You've got to stop. Thank you.
Trustee Dodge.
Happy New Year. I think we're going to have a pretty good year in Orland Park in 2019. And to the people of Orland Park, I would say I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing for an awfully long stretch of years, which is ideas come before the board by one of my colleagues, Trustee Ruzick. She and I have had a couple of conversations. I have some specific technical issues, if you will, about the ethics ordinance, but I support the idea that we kind of set a different standard in terms of disclosure without making it burdensome on anybody, and we'll continue to work the problem with a colleague, hopefully in a positive manner.
Thank you. So, well, first I was going to thank the trustees for pushing, and the ethics ordinance is obviously clearly important to discuss, and I want to thank you for agreeing, as I said before, to push it to this meeting, because I was not in a position to have that discussion, even though I could have participated over the phone. It wouldn't have been appropriate at that time. Regarding the robocalls, you can say, Trustee Carroll, that you're not accusing me of making the robocalls after you accused me of making the robocalls. So, I'll say the same thing to you that I would say to the person who's making the robocalls, is have the guts to say who you are and make the accusation. Because whoever's making these robocalls is not identifying themselves. I heard about the robocall. I didn't hear, and I had one person before the meeting say something to me about the robocall, and I heard it mention Joe Lamargo. I know nothing about its content whatsoever. Regarding the individual that I know does robocalls, after the first one, I reached out to him and said, this is not helpful. If you did this, he swore he didn't, and he's sworn since that he didn't. So I can't control these robocalls. I'd have to beg, it begs the question, why is someone making a robocall? This is the 6th or 7th one, and then every time I'm either accused directly or indirectly on the board floor. And to clarify the record, I believe that the only person who golfs at Crystal Tree, and apparently, according to them, abuses caddies, would be me, because I'm the only one that plays there. So I don't think that all of you are the only ones that have been attacked on these robocalls. I think they also attack the people who voted for the gaming ordinance as well. So, and I certainly voted for that. So I don't think any of us have been immune to some of these attacks. Some have been called out personally. I think Trustee Carroll has. I think John Keating has, and I think Joe Lamargo has, and it's unacceptable. I don't think anyone here, including Joe Lamargo, we may have had our differences, and I've certainly had no problems airing those differences here or airing those differences elsewhere with him present in the room. So it's not, these things are unacceptable. Who's ever doing them should follow the law and should identify themselves and the phone number. I know that you think that I'm doing them. I'm not. It would be stupid. You may say you're a political neophyte. I'm not a political idiot. So I'm definitely not doing those. With that said, Happy New Year, everyone. And unfortunately, we don't have the Bears to look forward to next week, so we can all hang our heads for that. And I look forward to a good year. I think we have more good things coming for our retail environment, and I think there's going to be a lot of good news over the next month. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Oh, sorry, I'll take a motion to go to closed session.
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Fenton.
Motion to go in executive session for A, approval of minutes, B, setting the price for sale or lease of village property, and C, purchase or lease of real property for the use of the village.
Second.
Call the roll.
Trustee Fenton.
Aye.
Trustee Calandrello.
Aye.
Trustee Dodge. Aye. Trustee Guerra.
Aye.
Trustee Ruzick.
Aye.
Trustee Carroll.
Aye.
Mayor Pico.
Aye.